Champions. It's all tomorrow, right here on SportsGrid.
Super Bowl MVP, multiple Super Bowl chances there, Super Bowl championship as they got it. Nick Sirianni said on the radio, no chance that Jalen Hurts is going to be benched. But by the way, Jalen Hurts didn't play the last 3 games. I think the Eagles would be 3-0 in those games, though. Just saying, Joe.
Oh, wow. How the mighty have fallen. When the Eagles fans turn on their quarterback, it's getting ugly in Philly, folks.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
They're doing a new show about a Japanese interpreter.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they're doing I don't know if it's a documentary or actors are in it.
It's got a.
I think it's a drama.
It's a real show.
It's like a scripted show?
Yeah.
About a Japanese interpreter?
Yes.
I wonder who's getting paid for that.
The Craig Carton Show, only on SportsGrid.
You're legendary. I'm legendary. And both of these guys love each other. Right? Cam Ward, they do. They work out. They work out. Legendary.
Go ahead.
Cam Ward.
Yep.
Shador Sanders.
Yep.
250 plus and 2 tutties each.
Amazing. That's nuts.
What? Why is it nuts?
Come on, that's crazy.
Why, though?
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I think this is a very tough one. I haven't bet this because I still think it's that close. I would lean towards the sentiment of the voter body instead of the anointing of the new star. But at a certain point, the next 2 weeks, Drake May could be undeniable. It's really interesting market right for those two. And remember when Matthew Stafford wasn't going to play all year? Remember in August where he wasn't practicing? And now he is number 2 for MVP. So go figure.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
The end of the Chiefs dynasty plus the NBA trade season officially starts. FOS Today starts now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Philadelphia Sports Today, your look inside the stories that are shaping the business and culture of sports. I'm Baker Machado here at FOS Studios in New York City, and this podcast is brought to you by Invesco QQQ. Changing the game has always been our game. You can access NASDAQ 100 companies in just one ETF, Invesco Distributors, Inc. Now, coming up, the Big 12 reportedly might get a major private equity investment in the conference. This just days after the University of Utah received their own $500 million investment. Plus, it's the unofficial start to the NBA trade season, so will we get closure on what happens next for Chris Paul or even Giannis? But first, let's start on what might be the end of the Chiefs dynasty, all in today's main event. Well, after losing to the Chargers over the weekend, the defending AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs will miss the playoffs for the very first time since 2014. That's the second longest streak behind the 2009 to 2019 Patriots. And this included 3 Super Bowl wins, 2 conference titles, and 7 straight trips to the AFC Championship game. And to make matters worse, Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL. So with much of his next season now in doubt, let's bring in FOS reporter Eric Fisher for more. I mean, Eric, what a dynastic run for the Chiefs here. Is this really the end of the road for this legendary team?
Possibly. Certainly the rest of the league is sort of building up around them. You think of these upstart stories like the Patriots and what the Broncos have become. The Jaguars are good again. The Bills are still right there every year. That the competition in that conference is really built up around them, and that while I don't think they'll necessarily be out of the playoffs next year, I think they can come back strong. I don't think they're going to necessarily be the dominant power that they've been here this last decade and all those accolades you just ran off.
I mean, given the fact that we know an injury like what Mahomes had takes at least a full year, if not more, to sort of recover, who knows how much of next season he's going to be able to play. Then you have a bunch of other roster concerns out there. How much longer does Travis Kelce continue to play? They're $34 million over the cap. So potentially could this, I know you said they might make the playoffs next year, but could there be a significant amount of changes for this team next year?
Oh, I think there's going to be change regardless. I think there's still a lot of talent there. And, if Patrick Mahomes can even play a half a season next year, you can't count this team out, but you correctly indicate the cap figure, and there's a lot of difficult decisions to be made. As I said, they've got a lot of competition around them. I forgot to mention even the Chargers in their own division. They're looking like they're going to be a playoff team again. So there's a lot happening around them, and there absolutely will be changes. There's still a lot of talent on the field and in the front office with this team. So you can't count them completely out, but there are definitely hard decisions coming.
We know the ratings for most of the games in the regular season have been really great this year for the NFL. If anything, they're beating numbers that they've had in years past. And a lot of that is attributed to teams like the Chiefs, who have been one of the highest rated teams for the league. Is there a concern about the remaining nationally televised games and that big Christmas Day game that Amazon has this year, where the Chiefs are playing, where all of a sudden it kind of sucks the attention out of the room?
It's definitely going to hurt. To be clear, the cupboard is not completely bare. The NFL is going to end the regular season no worse than with their second best viewership total in league history, if not better than that. They continue to be on a real growth run in terms of their audience. That said, the Chiefs are the biggest draw in the league, and they've been involved in 4 of the 5 most watched games this season. And this Christmas Day game against the Broncos, which looked like a massive matchup when it was announced in May, obviously takes on a very different tenor now, with the Chiefs officially eliminated and Mahomes definitely going to be out of action. So not how they drew it up.
Yeah, and let's talk about that game specifically, because Amazon, this is their first Christmas Day game. We know Netflix has the first 2. Has this been something that Amazon has been working for a while to get this later Christmas Day game?
Without question, they would love to have another Black Friday type situation where they put up another big number and had a great game for Black Friday. But, as we're discussing here, the circumstances are very different. And they're not even going to get necessarily the same sort of lead in from Netflix in the earlier 2 games, because those 2 big games, which also looked great in May, are now duds as well. You got Cowboys Commanders in the afternoon, followed by Lions Vikings. You had 3 playoff teams in that mix that I just mentioned, and they're all out of the mix as well.
Our colleague Mike McCarthy has written a piece about, for the first time in 28 years, we're not going to have a Brady, a Manning, or a Mahomes, I guess even a Joe Burrow in the playoffs this year. Is there a worry that a lot of the star power is not there, and it's sort of making room for these younger stars like a Drake May and a Bo Nix now?
Yeah, again, we're in a little bit of a transition here, and it definitely will have an impact not having the Chiefs and Mahomes involved here. But I do want to be very clear, the cupboard is not bare here. We're still got Josh Allen in the playoffs, Jalen Hurts, the Super Bowl MVP. We got Matthew Stafford, probably this year's MVP in the Rams. Drake May, you mentioned, Bo Nix. There's a lot of talent out there. And again, if we end up with something like Bills Rams in the Super Bowl and having Stafford versus Allen, that's not bad.
That's a great point. Look, I know that the sky is not falling. Obviously, you're absolutely right. The Chiefs still have a ton of talent here. But I guess when you look at this team compared to other, NFL legendary teams like the Patriots, the Dolphins, all those runs, where would you sort of stack up this run that they've had?
They're right there at the very top. And again, the thing is, Patrick Mahomes just turned 30. He's still writing his story, and that, a number of these other legendary runs, whether it be what you mentioned with Brady and the Patriots, or before with the Bradshaw Steelers or the Montana 49ers or whatever, those quarterbacks got old. And even if they finished their career for a year or 2 somewhere else, and in Brady's case won a Super Bowl somewhere else, they were getting just age-wise to the end of their run. The interesting thing here about what Kansas City has done, it's great. And it's good. Even if it stops right now, it's going to stack up as one of the great runs all time in NFL history. But this could be a speed bump. They could come right back, or even if it takes 2 years, obviously we haven't heard the last of Patrick Mahomes here. And so that's the point that I'm making, is that he's still writing his story.
You mentioned a little bit ago, this is one of the highest rated years we've seen from the NFL that they've had in years past. Do we think that they're going to end this year as one of the highest rated, that we've had in the regular season?
Yeah, even with some of the, diminished attention that we'll probably see on Christmas Day, and maybe, a couple of these last weeks with the 1:00 games in particular, maybe not as great when you get 2 non-playoff teams going up against each other and people deciding to do something else. There has been so much great news for the NFL during these first 3 months of the season, that there's already a base there that they're going to end the season in a very strong position.
We were saying how the Chiefs and the Cowboys traditionally are always the highest rated team. I mean, in your mind, what team do you think is going to be the next highest rated one? Do you think it's going to be the Bills? Do you think sort of like this opens a window for another team to sort of take this over?
Yeah, Bills are going to be one that the networks would really love to get on a run because, again, there's so much heat around Josh Allen and he's such a great player. But the other one, if the Eagles made another run, they would really, really like that because, the Eagles have also been involved in 3 of the 10 most watched games so far this season, defending Super Bowl champions. I mentioned Jalen Hurts before. So if it's not a team like the Rams, the networks involved, particularly Fox, of course, with the NFC rights, they would love to see the Eagles make a run.
All right, and with the last little bit of time that we got going up for you, the Christmas Day game's obviously coming up next week, which are obviously really excited to see Netflix with those 2, and then we've got Amazon with that last one. What are you sort of watching in terms of storylines for those games on Christmas Day?
Well, again, given that we're dealing with a bunch of non-playoff teams at this point, I think this could be just another showcase for Bo Nix and the Broncos and how they're thinking about their positioning, because they're, especially now with the Patriots having lost to the Bills, the Broncos could be in line for the number 1 seed in the AFC, and I think they want to keep their foot on the gas here. So, what I'm really are they going to be a team to beat going into the playoffs? So I'm really going to be looking at the Broncos.
All right, Eric Fisher, a reporter here at Front Office Sports. Eric, thank you so much. And coming up next on the show, it's the unofficial start to the NBA trade season. So will we get some closure when it comes to Chris Paul? And what's the latest on Giannis and even Ja Morant? Could they be switching teams? We'll dive into that. Plus a big private equity deal happening in the Big 12, how that might affect the University of Utah, who's trying to get that same amount of money. That and so much more on Front Office Sports today, right after this quick break.
Massive budget down there in LSU, no doubt about it, Joe. But
I just want to bring in, he's very close to Eddie O, too.
Yeah.
And Eddie O, potentially, it said he would, love a return. You bring that type of talent, another major recruiter.
Yes.
And Ed Ogeron back to Baton Rouge. You're going to have a fantastic NFL caliber type of staff, and they're going to hit the ground running week number 1 come 2026.
Sports Grid's College Football Today.
There are a million ways to make money on this. There really is, right? Like, I sit back. We've given you a couple of ours that we've given you. I think they're all going to win, essentially. The gold one, the Google Views one. The only one I might not win, Cam, that I gave people was, will the U.S. government announce that aliens exist in 2026?
In-game live, only on Sports Grid.
Here's the problem. When Joe Dumars blows it up and trades Zion, who is going to give them anything more than 25 cents on the dollar for a damaged goods superstar who misses significant time, who doesn't love the game, but is built like a freight train? Problems are in New Orleans, and I don't know how it gets fixed.
Pro basketball today, only on Sports Grid.
Super Bowl MVP, multiple Super Bowl chances there, Super Bowl championship as they got it. Nick Sirianni said on the radio, no chance that Jalen Hurts is going to be benched. But by the way, Jalen Hurts didn't play the last 3 games. I think the Eagles would be 3-0 in those games, though. Just saying, Joe.
Oh, wow. How the mighty have fallen. When the Eagles fans turn on their quarterback, it's getting ugly in Philly, folks.
The Early Line, only on Sports Grid.
Welcome back, everyone, to FOS Today. I'm Baker Machado, and December 15th marks the unofficial start of the NBA trade season, where players who sign contracts over the summer can officially be dealt. So will we get a flurry of activity this week? Well, to get answers like this and so much more, let's bring in FOS reporter Colin Salau. So, Colin, explain why this is a big week for potential trades.
Yeah, so December 15 in particular is a very important day because players, as you mentioned, who signed contracts in the offseason as free agents are eligible to be traded. So Bobby Marks of ESPN pointed out today that 90% of the league is now eligible to be traded. There's still another point, which is January 15th, where veterans who re-signed with teams and other multi-year extensions, those players will be eligible to be traded on January 15th. But still, we have 90% of the league. 82 players are now suddenly eligible to be traded. And in an era where we have all these apron restrictions and several teams are struggling to even just find ways to be able to trade players because of how limited their options are, having most of the league now eligible could really kickstart what could be an interesting trade season, as you've mentioned. But I think another point that's also fascinating here is something that was included in the 2023 collective bargaining agreement, which is that players have until tomorrow if they are traded tomorrow, they can essentially be traded one more time this year or could still be eligible to be traded. That's December 16th. So now with additional players eligible, you might see one or two trades over the next day or two, and then those players could be shipped out again. Marks mentioned the example of Dennis Schroeder last year, who was traded multiple times. He's obviously now with the Kings, but he was traded multiple times last season. So that's why this time of the year is a little bit interesting in the NBA. Could we see a trade today? We might not, but some teams are probably discussing in the background.
Well, that was leads to my next question is do you expect, a flurry of trades, or do you think, given the fact that the deadline's not until the 5th, that a lot of teams will sort of wait for a little bit until they sort of figure out a little bit more of what's happening with their rosters before making a move?
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for teams to wait just because, obviously, like I mentioned, with January 15th, there's going to be more players that are going to be eligible. And I'm just going to bring it back again. The second apron, all these aprons just makes it so that, hey, even just an additional 10% more players will just add options for all the teams there. But like I said, I think there's still, there are going to be teams out there that know where they are 2 months into the season and feel like they need to make a move. I mean, look at the Chris Paul situation that's unraveling, or that's already unraveled in Los Angeles. He might be already, the Clippers might already be looking because they signed him in the offseason. He's eligible to be traded now, but I've also pointed out that it's a little bit complicated how they're going to trade him because they're hard capped to the first apron, which means they need to backfill him and have to wait essentially till probably January until when they can trade him. But that's just one of the examples of why teams may be looking to trade now, but also because of how complicated it is, we might not see like too much action until maybe January.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Chris Paul here because, yeah, you're right. They have to sort of backfill that position, which means he likely would get traded instead of just being released here. What do you think happens with Chris Paul, and is there a team in particular maybe that he would be a fit for?
Well, it's kind of funny that you say a team that he will be a fit for because the other day he was courtside at the NBA Cup watching two of his former teams play. In the Spurs and Oklahoma City. Now, neither of those teams necessarily need a point guard or even a backup point guard, as they both have significant depth at the guard position. But I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Paul just said, hey, I went to LA to live in LA. Maybe now I can just chase a championship since it's only going to be about half a year anyway. I know he wanted to retire at home with his family, but if he's going to join a team with 5 months left in the season, it might as well be one that might win a championship. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those teams that he's already familiar with in Oklahoma City or San Antonio.
And given the fact that he's had such an incredibly decorated career and never has won an NBA championship, all the more reason that he should sign with one of those teams, Denver. But anyway, let's talk about some of the other big names that potentially everybody's going to be watching for the trade before the trade deadline on February 5th. And that's obviously going to be Giannis, Anthony Davis, and even potentially Ja Morant. There's now some reporting out there from Mark Stein that is saying that maybe Giannis likely wouldn't go to Houston or even San Antonio or even Oklahoma City, which, by the way, has the most assets to acquire him, and that maybe it could just be the Knicks are the only destination here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if the Bucks are saying continue to stay where they've been saying the whole time, which is we're going to honor Giannis and have a good relationship with him and continue their strong relationship with him, then I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks are the only option. What can the Knicks offer back, specifically in draft assets? Not a lot, but there is enough in terms of just pure players that the Knicks could still give them back something, like a Karl Anthony Towns or an OG Anunoby. I will say that the Bucks would be, I guess, a little foolish to not explore the options of teams that have a deeper war chest of assets. But at the same time, Giannis brought your team a championship, your organization a championship for the first time in 50 years. You want to continue to keep that legacy and also show other teams that you're willing to treat star players this way. Show other players that that's how you treat your stars. I wouldn't be surprised. But ultimately, I also think that we're facing a situation that Giannis, it seems as the reporting that I've seen is that unless he asks out, and he's probably going to ask out to the Knicks, he's going to be in Milwaukee this year, at least until the end of the season.
Colin, while we got a little bit of time left with you, Tuesday we'll get the NBA Cup championship between the Knicks and the Spurs. Both had great semifinal games over the weekend. Do you think the NBA is happy with this matchup on Tuesday?
I mean, I'm sure the NBA would have preferred the Lakers or, like LeBron or Steph in the finals. But I think Wemby, at least for the future of the league, is probably the best option that they have. And against a big market franchise like New York, which we just talked about, I think if you had to give Adam Silver a ball and ask him what he really wanted, this might have been one of the top matchups that you could think of, one of the top permutations. So I'm excited to watch. I think the Oklahoma City game against the Spurs is one of the best. So it leads up to hopefully a very exciting championship final and maybe a finals preview. Wink, wink. I don't know.
Colin Salau, good stuff as always. Colin, thank you. And coming up next, everyone, the Big 12 getting $500 million potentially in private equity investment. We'll talk about that next.
Let's play our game of buy or sell. The Lions will make the playoffs this season. Buy or sell?
I believe that's what the computer tells us, right? They are almost exactly 50-50 to make the playoffs now after that win. Now, it's sort of the game I'm going to play here when we talk about the Cowboys making the playoffs. If you're going to put Detroit in, Craig, who are you taking out? All right? I mean, they're not, even with the win last night, they're not in the playoff spot right now. They're still the 8th seed here. You take out San Fran? I mean, their schedule's cake. They should get in. Green Bay beat you twice. I mean, so you would probably need, for them to make the playoffs, Seattle's the other team, by the way, I think Seattle gets in. You would need Green Bay or Chicago, really, what they're ready for is one to beat the other. They do play each other twice, to beat them twice, right? They can't have a split here. They need either Chicago to beat Green Bay twice or Green Bay to beat Chicago twice, sort of eliminate the other team. So I am probably selling this. I do think there's a chance here. You look at the Lions' schedule, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Chicago, the last two are on the road.
Yeah, I think that I'm on board here with you. In the AFC, Detroit would be in. But in the NFC, you have to make a prediction to knock a team out. Now, like as an example, in the NFC East, could you see a scenario, George, where Philadelphia just completely falls apart like they did 2 years ago? Sure, but then they still would win the division. Like you really can't find a path for the Lions unless, for me, I guess the team that I would question the most to make it and knock them out would be the Bears. Like that would be it. It would be just the Bears playing the softer schedule. I know they beat Philadelphia last week, but I just can't do it right now. So unfortunately, this could be a 11-win season, 10-win season for Detroit without them getting in. I will sell. They will not make it. I'm with you here.
Fantasy Sports Today, Friday, starting at 3 p.m. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today. I'm Baker Machado, and this podcast is brought to you by Invesco QQQ. In football, changing the game begins with rethinking it, like rethinking how players work on their game. And with wearable technology, advanced analytics, AI, and more, that same innovative thinking that changes the game could also change your portfolio. And Invesco QQQ gives you access to the innovators who are rethinking the world, so let's rethink possibility. And now it's time for our asset class segment sponsored by Invesco QQQ. And the Big 12 Conference is approaching a potential $500 million private capital agreement with Redbird Capital Partners and Weatherford Capital. This just days after the University of Utah's own private equity deal opened the doors for others to mimic. So let's bring in asset class author Ben Horney for more. So Ben, tell us exactly what the Big 12 is doing here.
Yeah, this one broke late on Friday. A source reached out to me, and it's very interesting. It kind of, first of all, as you said in the intro, the thing that happened last week with Utah, this kind of actually proved what we've previously talked about, which is that that Utah deal with Otro Capital is giving other parties more confidence to do deals and announce things. But this isn't a private equity deal. It's a different sort of deal. So what's happening here, which again, they're still in talks, so this could fall apart, which we saw happen with another big conference deal earlier this year. They're looking into forming a partnership where there would be schools would have the ability to opt in or out. The Big 12, the potential 500 millions, I think schools would each get a piece of that. It's not clear the exact structure. Some outlets kind of put this forth as though it was a private credit agreement, which is something that we've talked about. What it is not is it's not an equity agreement. So even though Redbird Capital Partners is definitively a private equity firm, this is not an agreement where Redbird will be buying a stake in a corporate entity that's been set up. They're not buying a stake in the Big 12. They will share in, revenue generation, essentially.
Okay, that's good to know. And for our viewers, by the way, just to disclose, Redbird IMI, which Redbird Capital Partners is a joint venture partner of, is the primary investor here for us here at Front Office Sports. Ben, I guess with the Utah news, and by the way, Utah in the Big 12, how would this sort of work in theory if a school like Utah is getting private equity investment in their own school and also in the conference? Could they basically have both?
Yeah, so that's another really interesting aspect of this. What I was told is that there would not be a restriction on schools making their own deals. So the fact that Utah announced that deal, they're good to go with that, and they can get money through that. They can opt into this deal if it gets finalized and they want. And now suddenly you have lots of money flying around. Again, in this era, post-house settlement, NIL, transfer portal, schools really do need money.
You mentioned the deal with the Big Ten Conference that fell apart with UC Investments. That was a situation where UC Investments was going to be taking an equity stake in the Big Ten enterprise, which would be the media deals and all that other sort of stuff here. Is this, and you correctly mentioned that deal fell apart, would this sort of investment by Redbird into the Big 12 be something similar here? It'd only be sort of enterprise things that they would sort of have control over potentially.
Yeah, it's not clear to me whether it would necessarily be similar to that or if there would be real true key differences. I mean, again, the big thing that you have to look for when any of these are announced is this deal being described as a private equity deal? Is there an equity stake being purchased? Or is it something else? And if it's something else, then that means that, okay, even if it involves private equity, that's still sensitive, but it's different. We have already seen colleges accept private debt in various forms. An interesting thing with the Big Ten deal, so that deal fell apart because there were a few member schools that were not cool with it, basically. And I was speaking to one private equity industry executive last week who told me that from his understanding, and he doesn't necessarily know 100%, but his understanding was that there were a few key players involved, that were going to be affected by that deal who weren't kept fully in the loop. And suddenly the deal was coming out and it was being reported that it was close to being done. And we don't know if it was the schools that were opposed to it or not, or if it was some other stakeholder. But basically there was a few key people who were like, wait a second, we were not kept in the loop. We are not cool with this. And that's something we talked a little bit about with the Utah thing, where it was lawmakers kind of seemed a little flabbergasted that they were not informed. So it's kind of this like politics issue that seems a little silly, but it's very important. You don't want major people who have a stake in this deal to not know about it before it gets reported. So here, it seems like the Big 12, for the most part, is doing a better job of that, although that remains to be seen. We'll see if someone comes out and rails against it.
Yeah, and also going to be interesting to see if this, again, opens the floodgates that more schools and more conferences continue to look into this. Ben Horney, thank you so much. And by the way, you can sign up for Ben's newsletter, The Asset Class, by heading over to frontofficesports.com. And this segment is sponsored by Invesco QQQ. And with the last little bit of show we have left with you, let's tell you what we're watching on this Monday night. A lot of stuff in the NHL. We'll start with the Panthers taking on the Lightning. That game is at 7 p.m. Eastern on NHL Network. Meanwhile, we got Monday Night Football. The Dolphins taking on the Steelers. That's at 8:15 Eastern on ESPN. And then a doubleheader in the NBA. The second game, the best one tonight, you got the Rockets at 16-6 taking on the Nuggets at 18-6. That's at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. And that's going to do it for this edition of Front Office Sports Today. We'll be back with more tomorrow.